Today I have prepared 3 scary stories for you. Enjoy listening. Share your opinion in the comments. I wake to the sound of rain tapping against my window, a familiar melody that fills me with a sense of melancholy. Stretching my arms, I glance at the clock. 7:00 a.m. Another day begins in the quiet town of Willow Creek. As I shuffle downstairs to the kitchen, the scent of coffee fills the air, comforting and familiar. My mother, ever the early riser, sits at the table with a cup in hand, a weary smile on her face. "Morning, sweetheart," she greets me, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "Did you sleep okay?" I nod, pouring myself a cup of coffee before joining her at the table. As I take a sip, my gaze falls upon a crumpled envelope lying beside my plate. A letter addressed to me in my grandmother's elegant handwriting. Curiosity piqued, I tear open the envelope, unfolding the yellowed parchment within. My eyes scan the words, my heart quickening with each passing line. "My dearest Emily," the letter begins. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. But there are things you must know, secrets buried deep within the walls of our family home." I look up, meeting my mother's gaze, and realize that the past I thought I knew may hold more mysteries than I ever imagined. The road stretches endlessly before me, winding its way through lush forests and rolling hills. Beside me sits my best friend, Lucy, her laughter filling the car as we sing along to our favorite songs on the radio. "So, you're really going to Willow Creek?" Lucy asks, her eyes wide with curiosity. "I've heard it's like something out of a storybook." I nod, my excitement bubbling beneath the surface. "Yeah, my grandmother left me her old house, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to get away for a while, you know." Lucy grins, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief. "Well, don't forget to send me postcards from your quaint little town." As we drive on, the landscape transforms around us, the familiar sights and sounds of the city fading into memory. And as Willow Creek comes into view, nestled amidst the trees like a hidden treasure, I feel a sense of anticipation building within me. Little do I know, the journey ahead will be filled with more twists and turns than I ever imagined. The old house looms before me, its weathered facade a testament to years gone by. Ivy crawls up the walls like ancient fingers reaching for the sky, and the front porch sags beneath my weight as I step onto it, the wood groaning in protest. Pushing open the creaking door, I am greeted by the musty scent of dust and neglect. Sunlight filters through the dusty windows, casting long shadows across the empty rooms. "This place has seen better days," Lucy remarks, her voice echoing in the silence. I nod, my eyes scanning the faded wallpaper and worn furniture. "Yeah, but there's something about it, something familiar." As we explore the house, memories stir within me. Echoes of laughter and whispered secrets that linger in the corners of my mind. And as the sun sets beyond the horizon, casting the house in a warm golden light, I realize that this place holds more than just memories. It holds the key to unlocking the secrets of my past. Days turn into weeks as I settle into life in Willow Creek, each moment filled with new discoveries and unexpected twists. From exploring hidden passageways in the old house to uncovering long-forgotten treasures in the attic, every day brings me closer to unraveling the mystery of my family's past. But as I delve deeper into the secrets hidden within the walls of my grandmother's house, I find myself drawn to a name: Amelia Hawthorne, a distant relative whose memory seems to haunt every room. "She was your grandmother's sister, Mrs. Jenkins," the town librarian tells me, her voice hushed with reverence. "But no one ever talks about her. Some say she was cursed, others say she simply vanished without a trace." I nod, my curiosity piqued. "Do you think she's still alive?" Mrs. Jenkins shrugs, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "Who's to say? But if you're looking for answers, I'd start with the old cemetery on the hill. They say Amelia's grave is marked by a single rose bush, blooming even in the dead of winter." As I set out on my quest to uncover the truth about Amelia Hawthorne, I can't shake the feeling that her story is intertwined with my own in ways I never imagined. Chapter 5. Shadows of Doubt. Night falls over Willow Creek, casting the town in an eerie silence broken only by the sound of my footsteps echoing against the cobblestone streets. The old cemetery lies before me, its iron gates creaking open as I step inside. Moonlight filters through the trees, casting long shadows that dance across the gravestones. My heart pounds in my chest as I search for Amelia Hawthorne's final resting place, the weight of uncertainty pressing down upon me like a heavy cloak. And then I see it. A single rose bush, its delicate petals bathed in silvery light. Kneeling before the grave, I brush away the fallen leaves, tracing my fingers over the worn inscription. Amelia Hawthorne. I read aloud, my voice barely a whisper. Beloved sister, lost but never forgotten. But as I gaze upon the gravestone, a chill runs down my spine, and I realize that there is more to Amelia's story than meets the eye. And as the shadows lengthen around me, I can't shake the feeling that someone, or something, is watching from the darkness. Chapter 6. Into the Unknown. The days blur together as I delve deeper into the mystery of Amelia Hawthorne, each clue leading me further down a twisting path of intrigue and danger. From hidden crypts beneath the church to forgotten journals hidden in the attic, every discovery brings me closer to the truth, and closer to the shadows that lurk just beyond the edge of my vision. But as I piece together the fragments of Amelia's life, I realize that the answers I seek may lie not in the past, but in the present. And as I confront the darkness that haunts Willow Creek, I know that the journey ahead will test not only my courage, but my very soul. With determination in my heart and Lucy by my side, I set out into the unknown, ready to face whatever secrets lie waiting in the depths of the past. And as the echoes of footsteps fade into the night, I know that the story of Amelia Hawthorne is far from over, and that the greatest mysteries are yet to be revealed. In the heart of the bustling city, Sarah's apartment buzzed with anticipation as we gathered to celebrate her birthday. The air was thick with laughter and joy, as friends from near and far came together to mark the occasion. Brightly colored balloons adorned the walls, casting cheerful shadows across the room. The scent of freshly baked cake mingled with the sounds of chatter and excitement, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. As the evening unfolded, we indulged in delicious treats and shared stories of times gone by. Sarah's smile lit up the room as she blew out the candles on her cake, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world. It was a moment of pure happiness, a fleeting respite from the chaos of everyday life. But little did we know, the shadows of the basement lurked just beneath the surface, waiting to shatter the tranquility of the evening and plunge us into a nightmare we would never forget. As the night wore on, and the laughter grew louder, someone suggested a game of hide and seek to keep the festivities going. Excited whispers filled the room as we eagerly agreed, the prospect of a thrilling game adding an extra spark to the evening's festivities. The basement, with its dimly lit corridors and hidden nooks, seemed like the perfect setting for our adventure. With hearts pounding with anticipation, we scattered throughout the apartment, each of us searching for the perfect hiding spot. I found myself drawn to the basement, the promise of secrecy and excitement luring me into its depths. As I descended the stairs, a shiver ran down my spine, but I brushed it off as nothing more than nerves. Little did I know, the darkness that awaited me below held secrets far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. In the dim light of the basement, shadows danced and swirled, casting eerie shapes upon the walls. I found myself drawn to a corner of the room, where a lone mannequin stood silent and still, draped in a dusty old blanket. It seemed out of place amidst the clutter and chaos of the basement, but I paid it little mind as I searched for the perfect hiding spot. Hours passed as I waited in silence, the minutes stretching on endlessly as I strained to hear any sign of movement. And then I saw it, a figure emerging from the darkness, shrouded in the same blanket that had covered the mannequin just moments before. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the truth. The figure was no mannequin, but a living, breathing person, lurking in the shadows of the basement, unseen and unknown. Fear gripped me like a vice as I stumbled backward, my mind reeling with disbelief. How had someone managed to sneak into the basement undetected? And more importantly, what did they want with us? I called out to the others, my voice trembling with fear as I tried to warn them of the intruder in our midst. Panic rippled through the group as they rushed to my side, their eyes wide with terror as they took in the sight before them. Sarah let out a scream as she stumbled backward, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she reached for her phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed the emergency number, praying for help to arrive before it was too late. But as we waited for the authorities to arrive, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Somehow, I knew that the nightmare was far from over, that the true horror was yet to come. As we waited for the police to arrive, we frantically searched the basement for any sign of the intruder, our hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, every creak of the floorboard sending shivers down our spines. But despite our best efforts, the intruder remained elusive, slipping through our fingers like smoke in the wind. With each passing moment, the sense of unease grew stronger, a nagging feeling that we were running out of time. As we huddled together in the darkness, I couldn't help but wonder, what had brought the intruder to our doorstep? And more importantly, what did they plan to do now that they were here? Minutes turned into hours as we waited for the police to arrive, but when they finally did, the intruder was nowhere to be found. The basement lay silent and still, as if the events of the night had never happened at all. Confusion and frustration clouded our minds as we tried to make sense of what had just occurred. How had the intruder managed to vanish without a trace? And more importantly, what did it mean for our safety and security? As the police combed through the basement for clues, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something, that there was a piece of the puzzle we had yet to uncover. But try as I might, the answers remained just out of reach, taunting me with their elusiveness. In the days that followed, the memory of that fateful night haunted my every waking moment, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the safety of our walls. Sleep eluded me as I tossed and turned, the shadows of the basement dancing at the edge of my consciousness. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was a glimmer of hope, a determination to uncover the truth and reclaim our sense of security. For though the shadows of the basement may have cast a long and terrifying shadow over our lives, we refused to let fear dictate our actions. Armed with nothing but our courage and our unwavering determination, we vowed to confront the darkness head-on, to shine a light into the shadows and banish the fear that had taken hold of our hearts. In the end, it was not the darkness of the basement that defined us, but the strength and resilience of our spirits. Together, we faced our fears and emerged victorious, our bond stronger than ever before. Though the memory of that fateful night would forever linger in the recesses of our minds, we refused to let it hold us back. Instead, we turned our gaze toward the future, determined to live each day to the fullest and cherish the moments we shared together. For in the end, it was not the shadows that defined us, but the light that we carried within our hearts. And as long as we stood together, there was nothing that could dim its radiance. Years have passed since that fateful night in Sarah's basement, but the memories still linger like ghosts in the corners of my mind. Time may have dulled the sharp edges of fear and uncertainty, but the scars remain, a reminder of the darkness that once threatened to consume us. Yet amidst the shadows, there is light, a beacon of hope that shines brightly in the darkness, guiding us through even the bleakest of nights. It is the light of friendship and resilience, the light of courage and determination that has carried us through the darkest of times. We may never fully understand the events that transpired that night, nor the identity of the mysterious intruder who slipped into our lives like a phantom in the night. But in the end, it is not the answers that matter, but the lessons we have learned along the way. For in facing our fears and confronting the darkness head-on, we have emerged stronger and more united than ever before. We have learned to cherish the moments we share with one another, to hold on to the light that burns within us, even in the darkest of times. And as we look to the future, I know that no matter what challenges may come our way, we will face them together, armed with nothing but our unwavering resolve and the enduring strength of the bonds that bind us. For though the shadows of the past may linger, they can never extinguish the light that shines within us, guiding us through even the darkest of nights. And as long as we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot overcome. The Henderson family's car rumbled along the dusty road, kicking up clouds of red earth as they made their way deeper into the heart of the Indian reservation. Sarah pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging up the glass as she gazed out at the sprawling landscape. "Wow," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's so beautiful." Beside her, Ethan nodded, his eyes wide with excitement. "Yeah, it's like something out of a storybook." Their parents exchanged a knowing smile as they pulled up to the weathered house that would be their home for the summer. Stepping out of the car, they took in the sight of the towering pines and rolling hills that surrounded them, the air thick with the scent of pine needles and wildflowers. "It's perfect," Sarah breathed, her heart swelling with gratitude for the chance to spend time in such a magical place. As they unpacked their belongings and settled into their new surroundings, they could feel the energy of the land pulsing beneath their feet, welcoming them with open arms. Little did they know that their innocent curiosity would soon lead them into the depths of a mystery that would change their lives forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Sarah and Ethan found themselves drawn to the basement of their temporary home. With flickering flashlights in hand, they descended the creaky stairs into the darkness, their laughter echoing off the walls. In the dim light, they discovered an old wooden chest, its lid barely hanging on by a single rusty hinge. Excitedly, they pried it open, revealing a treasure trove of forgotten toys and games. Among them, a dusty board game caught their eye, a relic from a bygone era. Ignoring the warnings of their parents echoing in their minds, Sarah and Ethan eagerly set up the game, the pieces clicking into place with a sense of anticipation. As they rolled the dice and moved their tokens across the board, the air seemed to grow heavy with tension, the darkness pressing in around them like a suffocating blanket. Suddenly, a sharp rap at the window shattered the silence, causing the children to jump in fright. Peering through the glass, they saw a figure standing in the moonlight, its features obscured by the shadows. Heart pounding, Sarah reached out to draw the curtains close, but before she could move, the figure vanished into the night. Fear gripped them like icy fingers as they scrambled to their feet, the game forgotten in their haste to escape the basement. Racing up the stairs, they'd burst into the safety of the living room, their breath coming in ragged gasps. Their parents, sensing their distress, rushed to their side, comforting them with gentle words and soothing touches. But deep down, they knew that something had been awakened in the darkness, something ancient and primal, lurking just beyond the edge of their understanding. That night, as Sarah drifted off to sleep, she was plagued by unsettling dreams of shadowy figures and whispered secrets. She tossed and turned, her brow furrowed in confusion as she struggled to make sense of the images that danced behind her closed eyelids. In her dream, she found herself standing in the basement once more, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The wooden chest loomed before her, its lid creaking open with a sound like thunder. As she peered inside, she saw a swirling vortex of darkness, reaching out to engulf her in its cold embrace. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips as she was pulled deeper and deeper into the abyss. The next morning, Sarah awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to shake off the remnants of her unsettling dream. But try as she might, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the pit of her stomach. As she made her way downstairs, she found Ethan already sitting at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed in concentration as he stared at the board game from the night before. "We shouldn't have played that game," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something wrong with it. Sarah nodded in agreement, a shiver running down her spine as she remembered the figure at the window and the sense of dread that had filled the basement. "We have to tell Mom and Dad," she said, her voice trembling with fear. "We have to warn them before it's too late." That afternoon, Sarah and Ethan sat down with their parents to discuss what had happened the night before. They recounted their chilling encounter in the basement and the strange dreams that had haunted them ever since. Their parents listened intently, their faces growing pale as they realized the gravity of the situation. They had heard rumors of strange happenings on the reservation, whispers of ancient spirits and forgotten rituals that had been passed down through the generations. "We have to find out more," their father said, his voice determined. "We have to uncover the truth behind these shadows before they consume us all." With that, they set out to explore the reservation, determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden beneath its surface. Their journey led them to the home of an elderly woman, her face weathered by years of wisdom and experience. She welcomed them with open arms, sensing the urgency in their voices as they recounted their tale of terror. As they sat by the fire, she spoke of legends passed down through the ages, tales of spirits that roamed the land, seeking vengeance on those who dared to disturb their rest. "The shadows you saw are ancient beings, older than time itself," she said, her voice filled with solemnity. "They have been awakened by your curiosity, and now they will stop at nothing to reclaim what is rightfully theirs." Armed with the knowledge they had gained from the elder, the Henderson family set out to perform a ritual that would appease the spirits and banish the shadows from their midst. With each step they took, they could feel the weight of centuries pressing down upon them, the air thick with the scent of incense and sage. As they chanted the ancient words passed down through the generations, they felt a sense of peace wash over them, their hearts filled with hope that they could finally put an end to the nightmare that had plagued them for so long. As the last echoes of their chant faded into the night, the Henderson family felt a sense of relief wash over them, the darkness lifting like a veil from their eyes. They knew that they had faced their fears head-on and emerged victorious, stronger and more united than ever before. With a final glance back at the reservation, they bid farewell to the land that had brought them so much joy and so much pain. But though they were leaving behind the shadows that had haunted them, they knew that they would always carry with them the lessons they had learned and the memories they had forged in the heart of the Indian reservation. Months had passed since the Henderson family's harrowing encounter on the Indian reservation. Though the memories of that fateful summer lingered in their minds like a distant dream, they had emerged from the darkness stronger and more united than ever before. As they settled back into their normal lives, they found solace in the simple joys of family and community. Together, they laughed and loved, cherishing each moment as if it were their last. But even as they moved forward, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the shadows of the reservation still lingered just beyond the edge of their vision, waiting for the moment to strike. Yet, in the face of uncertainty, they stood tall, their spirits unbroken by the trials they had faced. For they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by a love that transcended time and space. And as the sun rose on a new day, casting its warm rays across the land, the Henderson family knew that they were ready to face whatever the future held, armed with nothing but their courage and the knowledge that they were never truly alone. As I sit in front of my computer screen, the glow of the monitor casting a soft blue light across my face, I can't help but feel a surge of excitement. Ever since I stumbled upon mentions of the dark web during my studies in computer programming, I've been utterly fascinated by its existence. The allure of the unknown, the hidden corners of the internet where anonymity reigns supreme, it all feels like an untapped world waiting to be explored. I take a deep breath, my fingers poised over the keyboard as I launch the Tor browser. My heart races with anticipation as I navigate through layers of encryption, finally arriving at the threshold of the dark web. It's like stepping into another dimension, one where the rules are different, and danger lurks around every corner. As I delve deeper, I come across forums and marketplaces teeming with illicit activity. Drugs, weapons, counterfeit goods, all available at the click of a button. But it's not the illegal commodities that catch my eye. It's the criminals themselves, the ones who think they're untouchable, operating in the shadows beyond the reach of law enforcement. With a newfound sense of purpose, I begin to envision a program, a digital vigilante, if you will, that could track these criminals down and expose them to the authorities. It's a risky endeavor, one that could easily land me in hot water if I'm not careful. But the thrill of the chase outweighs any sense of caution. As I start to sketch out the framework for my program, a sense of excitement bubbles within me. This could be my chance to make a real difference in the world, to use my skills for something greater than myself. Little do I know, however, that my journey into the dark web will soon take a sinister turn, leading me down a path from which there may be no return. Days turn into nights as I immerse myself in the creation of my program. Lines of code blur together as I fine-tune algorithms and implement encryption protocols to ensure the safety and anonymity of both myself and the targets of my investigation. It's a delicate balance, walking the line between vigilante justice and outright vigilantism. As I work, I can't shake the feeling of being watched, as if the eyes of the dark web are upon me, scrutinizing my every move. Paranoia sets in, and I find myself constantly checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see shadowy figures lurking in the corners of my apartment. But despite the creeping sense of unease, I press on, driven by a singular determination to see my project through to the end. I can already envision the headlines. Anonymous programmer exposes dark web criminals, leads to dozens of arrests. It's a fantasy perhaps, but one that keeps me motivated in the face of mounting challenges. Finally, after weeks of tireless work, my program is complete. I dub it Shadowcatcher, a fitting name for a tool designed to hunt down those who thrive in the shadows of the internet. With a mixture of excitement and trepidation, I activate the program and set it loose upon the dark web, eager to see what it will uncover. Little do I know the Pandora's box I've just opened, the forces I've unwittingly unleashed upon myself. For in the depths of the dark web, there are far darker things than even I could have imagined. Days turn into weeks as Shadowcatcher scours the dark web, gathering data and compiling profiles of suspected criminals. It's a painstaking process, sifting through mountains of encrypted messages and hidden forums. But with each new lead, I feel a sense of exhilaration coursing through my veins. I spend sleepless nights poring over the data, cross-referencing information, and piecing together the puzzle of the criminal underworld. It's like playing a game of cat and mouse, with each side trying to outwit the other in a high-stakes game of digital espionage. But as the weeks drag on, I start to notice something unsettling. The targets of my investigation seem to be one step ahead of me at every turn, as if they can anticipate my every move. It's as if Shadowcatcher has become a double-edged sword, cutting through the darkness but also drawing attention to itself in the process. Despite my growing sense of unease, I press on, driven by a combination of curiosity and stubborn determination. But little do I know that the true danger lies not in the criminals I seek to expose, but in the very fabric of the dark web itself. One fateful night, as I sit hunched over my computer screen, a message pops up on the Tor browser. It's encrypted, its origins shrouded in mystery, but the contents send a chill down my spine. "We know who you are." The message reads, "and we know what you're trying to do. But be warned, the dark web is not to be trifled with. Keep digging, and you may find yourself in deeper trouble than you ever imagined." I feel a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins as I read the words, a mixture of fear and excitement churning in the pit of my stomach. Who could be sending me this message, and how do they know about Shadowcatcher? But despite the warning, I can't bring myself to abandon my quest. If anything, the message only serves to fuel my determination, to prove to whoever sent it that I'm not afraid to face the darkness head-on. With renewed vigor, I dive back into my work, determined to uncover the truth behind the message and expose the criminals who lurk in the shadows. Little do I know, however, that I'm about to walk right into a trap from which there may be no escape. As I delve deeper into the dark web, the lines between reality and fantasy begin to blur. Shadows seem to dance at the corners of my vision, and every creak of the floorboard sends a shiver down my spine. Paranoia sets in, and I find myself constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see masked figures lurking in the darkness. But it's not just my imagination playing tricks on me. Everywhere I turn, I encounter obstacles and dead ends, as if someone or something is actively working against me. Messages go unanswered, leads turn cold, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. And then, just when I think things can't get any worse, I receive another message on the Tor browser. This time it's a video file, grainy and distorted, but unmistakably real. I watch in horror as the footage unfolds before my eyes, revealing scenes of unspeakable cruelty and depravity. It's a live stream, broadcast from somewhere deep within the dark web, showing a group of masked individuals bidding on human lives as if they were nothing more than commodities. I feel bile rising in my throat as I watch, the full horror of what I've stumbled upon finally sinking in. But before I can react, the video cuts off abruptly, leaving me staring at the blank screen in shock. I feel a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead as I realize the gravity of the situation. I've stumbled upon something far more sinister than I ever could have imagined, and now I'm in way over my head. With the weight of the dark web pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket, I know I have to act fast if I want to survive. But as I scramble to cover my tracks and erase any evidence of my involvement, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Every sound seems amplified, every shadow elongated into a potential threat. I feel like a cornered animal, trapped in a cage with no way out. But despite the overwhelming sense of dread gnawing at my insides, I refuse to give up without a fight. With trembling hands, I activate Shadowcatcher one last time, using it to trace the origins of the video and uncover the identities of those responsible. It's a risky move, one that could easily lead to my undoing, but I know I have no choice. As the program works its magic, I watch in breathless anticipation, praying for a miracle. And then, just when all hope seems lost, I receive a hit, a real, tangible lead that could finally bring me one step closer to the truth. With newfound determination coursing through my veins, I gather my belongings and prepare to make my escape. But as I slip out into the night, I can't shake the feeling that this is only the beginning, that the darkness of the web still has its claws sunk deep into my soul. But for now, at least, I'm free. And as I disappear into the shadows, I know that no matter what lies ahead, I'll never stop fighting to expose the truth and bring justice to those who deserve it most. Months have passed since my narrow escape from the clutches of the dark web, but the memories still haunt me like ghosts in the night. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of those poor souls, trapped in a hell of their own making, their silent screams echoing in the darkness. But despite the nightmares that plague my sleep, I refuse to let fear consume me. Instead, I channel my guilt and remorse into action, dedicating myself to a new mission: to bring down the criminals responsible for the horrors I witnessed, and to ensure that no one else suffers the same fate. With the help of law enforcement agencies and cybersecurity experts, I launch a full-scale investigation into the darkest corners of the web, determined to root out evil wherever it may hide. It's a daunting task, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but I refuse to back down, knowing that lives hang in the balance. As the weeks turn into months, our efforts begin to bear fruit. One by one, we track down the perpetrators behind the human trafficking ring, dismantling their operations and bringing them to justice. It's a bittersweet victory, tinged with sorrow for those who were lost along the way. But it's also a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But even as the dust settles and the guilty are brought to account, I know that my work is far from over. The dark web is a vast and ever-evolving landscape, filled with dangers both seen and unseen. But armed with the knowledge of what lies beneath the surface, I vow to never stop fighting, to never stop shining a light into the shadows. And as I look towards the future, I know that redemption lies not in the erasure of past mistakes, but in the relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. For in the end, it's not the darkness that defines us, but the light we choose to bring into the world. I never imagined curiosity could lead us down such a dark path. It all started innocently enough. A group of friends gathered around a computer, sharing stories and laughing late into the night. But then, someone mentioned the dark web. "I heard you can find anything there," Alex said, his eyes glinting with excitement. "I don't know, man. Isn't it dangerous?" I replied, feeling a tinge of unease. "Come on, don't tell me you're scared," Tara chimed in, her voice teasing. And just like that, curiosity got the better of us. We fired up Tor and began our descent into the depths of the internet. The screen flickered to life, revealing a maze of links and cryptic addresses. Each click took us further into the unknown, the anticipation building with every page load. "What are we even looking for?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't know, anything interesting," Alex replied, his voice eager. Hours passed in a blur as we delved deeper, stumbling upon forums and marketplaces shrouded in secrecy. But then we stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. A video link, buried deep within a chat room, promising something unimaginable. Against my better judgment, I clicked it, and what I saw will haunt me forever. The screen filled with images of torture and suffering, the sounds of screams echoing through the room. I felt sick to my stomach, bile rising in my throat. "We have to get out of here," I said, my voice trembling. But it was too late. We were in too deep, and there was no turning back. The images from the dark web burned themselves into my mind, haunting me day and night. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me like a shadow. "We need to do something," I said, pacing back and forth in my room. "But what can we do? We don't even know who's behind all of this," Sarah replied, her voice filled with frustration. "We have to find out. We can't just ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist," I said, my determination growing with every word. And so we began our investigation, scouring the dark corners of the internet for clues. But the deeper we dug, the more elusive our quarry became. "It's like they're always one step ahead of us," Alex said, his frustration palpable. But then we stumbled upon a lead, a cryptic message hidden within a forum, hinting at a group of shadowy figures pulling the strings from the shadows. "We have to find them," I said, my voice filled with determination. And so we set out on our quest, following the breadcrumbs left behind by our mysterious adversaries. As we delved deeper into the underbelly of the internet, the lines between right and wrong began to blur. What started as a quest for justice had become an obsession, consuming us in its darkness. "We're in too deep," Sarah said, her voice tinged with regret. "But we can't stop now. We're so close," I replied, my voice hollow with exhaustion. And so we pressed on, our resolve unwavering in the face of danger. But as we drew closer to the truth, the dangers grew ever more real. "We're being watched," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. And sure enough, we soon found ourselves pursued by shadowy figures lurking in the darkness. "We have to keep going. We can't let them intimidate us," I said, my voice filled with defiance. But deep down, I knew that the darkness was closing in, threatening to swallow us whole. As we continued our investigation, we found ourselves drawn deeper into the twisted world of the dark web. We uncovered horrifying truths that shook us to our core, each revelation more disturbing than the last. "We have to stop them," Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger. "But how?" "We're just a group of friends against a powerful and elusive enemy," Alex replied, his frustration evident. But then we stumbled upon a breakthrough. A name whispered in hushed tones across the darkest corners of the internet. "The puppeteer," I said, the words leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. And so we set out to unmask the face of evil, determined to bring justice to those who had suffered at his hands. Our pursuit of the puppeteer led us to the darkest depths of the dark web, where we found ourselves face to face with the embodiment of evil itself. "We have to be careful. He's dangerous," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But despite our fear, we pressed on, driven by a sense of justice that burned within us like a flame. And then we found him, a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, his eyes gleaming with malice. "So, you've come to challenge me," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "We're here to stop you." "To put an end to your reign of terror," Sarah replied, her voice filled with defiance. But the puppeteer only laughed, his laughter echoing through the darkness like a sinister symphony. "You think you can stop me? You're nothing but insects buzzing around my feet," he said, his voice filled with disdain. But we refused to back down, standing our ground against the darkness that threatened to consume us. And then the final showdown began, a battle between light and darkness that would determine the fate of us all. In the end, it was not brute force or cunning that brought down the puppeteer, but the power of truth and justice. "We did it," I said, my voice filled with relief as we watched the authorities take him away. But as the dust settled and the darkness receded, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered within me. "We may have stopped him, but at what cost?" Sarah said, her voice filled with sorrow. And she was right. Our journey had taken its toll, leaving scars that would never fully heal. But despite the pain and the darkness, there was also hope. Hope for a brighter future where the light of truth would always triumph over the shadows of evil. And as we stood together, our bond stronger than ever, I knew that we would always be guided by the light, no matter how dark the path may seem. As we stood amidst the aftermath of our harrowing ordeal, a sense of melancholy settled over us like a heavy blanket. The weight of what we had witnessed, the lives that had been lost, weighed heavily on our hearts. "We did what we had to do," Alex said, his voice strained with emotion. But what cost? Sarah whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I had no answer for her. The truth was, we had sacrificed so much in our quest for justice. Our innocence, our sense of security, our peace of mind, all had been tarnished by the darkness we had faced. But even in the midst of our despair, there was a glimmer of hope. For in the darkness, we had found strength we never knew we possessed. We had faced our fears head on and emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. We may have lost a part of ourselves along the way, but we also gained something, I said, my voice filled with determination. What do you mean? Sarah asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. We gained the knowledge that we are stronger together, that no matter how dark the world may seem, as long as we have each other, we can overcome anything. I replied, my words ringing with conviction. And as we stood together, united in our resolve, I knew that no matter what trials lay ahead, we would face them together, as friends bound by a bond stronger than steel. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined us, but the light that shone from within. I never thought I'd find myself venturing into the depths of the dark web. It all started with a harmless conversation at a friend's house, where he regaled us with horror stories he claimed to have stumbled upon online, tales that would terrify even the bravest souls. But amidst the chilling narratives, one phrase stuck with me like a splinter in my mind: dark web horror stories. As the night wore on, the curiosity gnawed at me, urging me to explore this hidden corner of the internet. So, fueled by equal parts curiosity and naivety, I found myself sitting in front of my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard, contemplating whether to take the plunge. What's holding you back, man? My friend's voice echoed in my head. You think you can handle it? With a shaky breath, I typed in the ominous words and hit enter, immersing myself in a world I never knew existed. The screen flickered to life, revealing a labyrinth of illicit activities and forbidden knowledge. The dark web was like a twisted version of the internet, a place where anonymity reigned supreme and morality was a foreign concept. I scrolled through pages filled with drug deals, counterfeit goods, and unthinkable services for sale. But amidst the chaos, one listing caught my eye. Weapons for sale. It was like stumbling upon a Pandora's box, tempting and terrifying all at once. What are you doing? My friend's voice snapped me out of my trance, but the allure of the dark web had already sunk its claws into me. I'm just looking, I mumbled, my heart pounding in my chest. But deep down, I knew that curiosity was quickly turning into something darker. Days turned into weeks, and my fascination with the dark web only grew stronger. What started as innocent curiosity soon spiraled into an obsession, as I delved deeper into its murky depths. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon a listing that promised the ultimate thrill, a weapon unlike any other. With trembling hands, I reached out to the seller, striking a deal that would change my life forever. As the days passed, I anxiously awaited the arrival of my purchase, my mind consumed by thoughts of what I had done. But no amount of regret could quell the excitement that coursed through my veins. Little did I know, I had just made a deal with the devil himself. The package arrived under the cover of darkness, its contents shrouded in mystery. With trembling hands, I tore open the package, revealing the weapon that would be my undoing. But as I marveled at its sleek design, a sinister revelation dawned upon me. I was no longer just a curious bystander. I was now a player in a dangerous game with stakes far higher than I could have ever imagined. As I held the weapon in my hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had opened a Pandora's box, unleashing forces beyond my control. It started with a simple message, a warning from an unknown sender. "You've crossed a line," it read, sending a shiver down my spine. But I brushed it off as a prank, convinced that I was untouchable behind the veil of anonymity. But as the days passed, the messages grew more ominous, each one serving as a chilling reminder that I was no longer safe. It wasn't long before I realized that I had become the target of something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. I was no longer just a curious bystander, I was now the prey in a deadly game of cat and mouse. With nowhere left to turn, I reached out to the only person who could help me, my friend. But as I poured out my fears and frustrations, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on my own in this nightmare. "You brought this upon yourself," my friend's voice echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of the choices that had led me down this dark path. But even as I pleaded for help, I knew that salvation was nothing more than a distant dream in this twisted world of shadows and secrets. As the threats grew more menacing, I realized that I had no choice but to comply with the demands of my tormentors. But with each payment made, I could feel my soul slipping further into the abyss, consumed by guilt and fear. I had become a pawn in a deadly game of extortion, my every move dictated by unseen hands. And as the walls closed in around me, I knew that there was no escaping the consequences of my actions. In the end, the price of silence was far higher than I could have ever imagined. But just when all hope seemed lost, a glimmer of light pierced through the darkness. The police had finally caught wind of the criminal operation that had ensnared me in its web, launching a full-scale investigation that would bring my tormentors to justice. As I watched from the sidelines, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could see the faintest glimpse of hope on the horizon. But even as justice was served, I knew that the scars of my ordeal would never truly heal. With the nightmare finally behind me, I made a solemn vow to leave the dark web behind for good. It was a chapter of my life that I was all too eager to close, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. But as I ventured out into the light of day, I couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. For better or for worse, the darkness would always be a part of me, a constant reminder of the choices that had led me down this treacherous path. But amidst the uncertainty, one thing was certain. I would never again underestimate the power of the dark web or the horrors that lay within its depths. In the aftermath of my harrowing ordeal, I found myself grappling with the memories that haunted me like specters in the night. The echoes of my own choices reverberated through my mind, each one a stark reminder of the darkness that lurked within me. I couldn't help but wonder what drove me to venture into the depths of the dark web in the first place. Was it curiosity, as I had told myself, or was it something deeper, something darker that had been lurking beneath the surface all along? As I searched for answers, I found myself confronting uncomfortable truths about myself and the world around me. The allure of the dark web had promised thrills and excitement, but it had delivered nothing but pain and suffering. But amidst the darkness, I found a glimmer of hope. For in confronting my own demons, I had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. With the worst of the storm behind me, I set out on a journey of self-discovery and redemption. I sought solace in the warmth of friendships forged in the crucible of adversity, finding comfort in the knowledge that I was not alone in my struggles. Together, we worked to rebuild what had been shattered by the forces of darkness, laying the foundations for a brighter future. And as the days turned into weeks, I found myself slowly but surely reclaiming the pieces of myself that had been lost along the way. But even as I forged ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows of the past still lingered, waiting to drag me back into their embrace. It was a constant battle, one that I fought with every ounce of strength that I possessed. As I ventured out into the world once more, I found myself confronting the unknown with a newfound sense of purpose and determination. No longer content to simply drift through life, I embraced the challenges that lay ahead with open arms, eager to carve out my own path in the world. But as I stepped out into the light of day, I couldn't help but wonder what lay beyond the horizon. The future stretched out before me like an endless expanse of possibilities, each one tinged with both promise and peril. But amidst the uncertainty, one thing was clear. I was no longer the same person who had ventured into the depths of the dark web all those months ago. I had been forged in the fires of adversity, emerging stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I navigated the twists and turns of life, I found myself drawn to those who had faced their own trials and tribulations with grace and courage. They were beacons of hope in a world shrouded in darkness, guiding me towards the light with their unwavering resolve. Together, we forged a path forward, each step bringing us closer to the promise of a better tomorrow. And as we stood shoulder to shoulder, facing the unknown with a sense of unity and purpose, I knew that we would overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined us, but the light that we carried within our hearts. And as long as we remained steadfast in our resolve, no obstacle could ever hope to stand in our way. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, I found myself embracing the journey with a sense of wonder and awe. Life was a tapestry of experiences, each one weaving its own unique thread into the fabric of my existence. And as I looked back on the trials and tribulations that had brought me to this moment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the lessons they had taught me. For it was through adversity that I had discovered my own strength and resilience, emerging from the crucible of darkness with a newfound sense of purpose and determination. But even as I looked towards the future with optimism and hope, I knew that the journey was far from over. For life was a never-ending adventure, filled with twists and turns that would test the limits of my resolve. But amidst the uncertainty, One thing was certain: I would face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and conviction, knowing that I was never alone in my struggles. As the sun rose on a new day, I found myself standing on the precipice of a new beginning. The shadows of the past lay behind me, their hold on me growing weaker with each passing moment. And as I gazed out into the horizon, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that I was finally free from the chains that had bound me for so long. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined me, but the light that shone from within. With a renewed sense of purpose and determination, I set out to carve out my own destiny in the world, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and conviction. For I knew that no matter what trials and tribulations awaited me on the road ahead, I would always carry the lessons I had learned from my journey through the darkness with me, a beacon of hope in a world that too often seemed consumed by shadows. And as I took my first steps into the unknown, I knew that the best was yet to come. I remember it like it was yesterday, the seemingly ordinary day that would forever be etched in my memory as the day everything changed. February 24th, just another Monday at Memphis County High School. I walked through the familiar halls, the chatter of students echoing around me, blissfully unaware of the terror that awaited us. Entering my computer programming class, I greeted my friends with a casual nod and settled into my seat. Olivia, my girlfriend, flashed me a warm smile as she sat beside me, her presence a comforting beacon amidst the monotony of the school day. Little did we know, the tranquility of our classroom would soon be shattered by chaos and fear. It started with a faint sound, barely perceptible over the hum of the classroom. At first, we dismissed it as nothing more than a distant noise. But as it grew louder, unease rippled through the room like a dark shadow creeping in. Then came the announcement, crackling through the intercom like an ominous warning. Lockdown procedure initiated. Panic erupted. Students scrambled for cover, desks overturned in a frenzy of fear. I reached for Olivia, my heart pounding in my chest as I pulled her close, desperate to shield her from whatever danger lurked beyond the classroom door. Time seemed to stand still as we huddled together, our breaths coming in shallow gasps. Then, like a nightmare come to life, he appeared. Benjamin, they called him, a name that would forever be seared into my mind. He burst into the classroom, a menacing figure wielding an arsenal of weapons and a deranged glint in his eyes. I froze, paralyzed with terror as he prowled among us, his gaze darting from one terrified face to the next. His laughter echoed off the walls, sending shivers down my spine as I prayed for it to end. I knew I had to protect Olivia, to shield her from the madness that threatened to consume us all. But as Benjamin's gaze fell upon her, a primal instinct surged within me, driving me to action. I lunged forward, desperation fueling my every move as I attempted to wrestle the weapon from his grasp. But he was stronger, his grip unyielding as he overpowered me with ease. "Let her go," I pleaded, my voice trembling with fear and rage. But Benjamin only laughed, his twisted smile sending a chill down my spine as he turned his attention back to Olivia. I watched in horror as Benjamin's hand tightened around the trigger, his finger poised to unleash destruction upon us all. Time seemed to slow as I reached out, my scream drowned out by the deafening roar of gunfire. And then she was gone, her life snuffed out in an instant, leaving behind nothing but a gaping void in my heart. I cradled her lifeless form in my arms, tears streaming down my face as I whispered words of love and regret into the silence of the classroom. As I mourned the loss of Olivia, Benjamin's voice cut through the haze of grief, his words like poison in my ears. "You have a choice," he sneered, his gaze burning into mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "You can join me or you can share her fate." I knew what I had to do, the weight of his words crushing me beneath their merciless weight. With a heavy heart, I nodded, resigned to a fate from which there could be no escape. I thought I had reached the depths of despair, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Under Benjamin's twisted influence, I committed unspeakable acts, each one driving me further into the darkness that threatened to consume my soul. I watched in horror as he forced me to turn the weapon on our principal, a man I had once respected and admired. The sound of his scream still echoes in my nightmares, a haunting reminder of the horrors I was forced to inflict upon others. As the chaos raged around us, Benjamin's grip tightened, his influence binding me to him in a deadly dance of despair. "Finish it," he commanded, his voice a chilling whisper in the darkness. With a heavy heart, I raised the weapon to my own head, the weight of my actions bearing down upon me like a crushing weight. And then, in a moment of clarity, I saw her face, Olivia's smile shining through the darkness like a beacon of hope. With a newfound resolve, I pulled the trigger, the deafening roar of gunfire echoing through the silence as I embraced the sweet release of oblivion. As I stand on the precipice of eternity, I am consumed by a sense of overwhelming sorrow and regret. I failed Olivia, I failed my classmates, and I failed myself. The weight of my actions hangs heavy upon my soul, a burden I will carry with me for all eternity. But amidst the darkness, there is a glimmer of hope, a flicker of light that refuses to be extinguished. In the end, I choose to believe that love will triumph over hate, that light will conquer darkness, and that even in our darkest moments, there is still hope for redemption. I never imagined my first day as a substitute teacher would unfold like this. The morning began like any other. I arrived at the school, greeted by the usual hustle and bustle of students shuffling to their classes. But then came the announcement over the intercom, a lockdown drill. I led my class into the designated classroom, instructing them to remain quiet and stay put. As I stood by the door, ensuring it was securely locked, I noticed something unusual, a faint rustling coming from the adjacent empty classroom. "Did you hear that?" one of the students whispered nervously. I hesitated for a moment, then cautiously approached the neighboring room. The door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open, heart pounding in my chest. And there he was, a stranger, huddled in the corner of the room, eyes wide with fear. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice trembling with uncertainty. The stranger hesitated, then spoke in a hushed tone. "Please don't call the police. I just needed a place to hide." My mind raced with questions as I stared at the stranger before me. Who was he? What had driven him to seek refuge in an empty classroom during a lockdown? "Are you armed?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, hands trembling as he held them up in surrender. "No, I swear. I'm not here to hurt anyone." I wanted to believe him, but the fear lingering in the air was palpable. With a deep breath, I made a decision. "Stay here," I instructed firmly. "I'm going to call the police." Before I could turn away, the stranger reached out, desperation in his eyes. "Please don't. They'll arrest me. You don't understand." I hesitated, torn between my duty as a teacher and the uncertainty of the situation. But then the intercom crackled to life once again, a voice announcing that the lockdown was over, and it was safe to resume normal activities. As the lockdown was lifted, chaos erupted throughout the school. Students spilled out of classrooms, chattering excitedly about the drill and eager to return to their routines. But for me, the presence of the stranger loomed large, casting a shadow over the otherwise ordinary day. I glanced back at him, still huddled in the corner, his eyes pleading with me to reconsider. But I knew I couldn't ignore the situation any longer. With a heavy heart, I dialed 911, my fingers trembling as I recounted the events that had unfolded. Within minutes, the school was swarming with police officers, their radios crackling with urgency as they converged on the empty classroom. I watched from a distance, a knot forming in my stomach as I wondered what would happen next. The interrogation room was cold and sterile, the harsh fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over the proceedings. I sat across from the stranger, my heart heavy with guilt as I watched him being questioned by the detectives. "Why were you hiding in the school?" one of the officers demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. The stranger hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around the room. I was just looking for a place to hide. I didn't mean any harm." But the detectives weren't convinced. They pressed him for answers, their questions growing more intense with each passing moment. And as the interrogation wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the stranger's story than met the eye. It wasn't until hours later, as the sun began to set and exhaustion began to set in, that the truth finally emerged. The stranger's name was Michael, a troubled teenager with a troubled past. He had fled from an abusive home, seeking refuge wherever he could find it. As he recounted his harrowing tale, tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't imagine what he had been through, the fear and desperation that had driven him to seek shelter in a school during a lockdown. And yet, despite the odds stacked against him, there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes, a determination to overcome the obstacles that life had thrown his way. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the memory of Michael and the impact he had made on me. Despite the chaos and confusion that had surrounded his presence in the school, there was something about him that touched my heart, a resilience and strength that defied all odds. And so, when the opportunity arose to help him, I didn't hesitate. With the support of the school administration and local authorities, we worked tirelessly to find him a safe place to stay, far away from the abuse and neglect he had endured for so long. As Michael embarked on a new chapter in his life, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and satisfaction. In a world filled with uncertainty and despair, he had reminded me of the power of compassion and empathy, the power to change lives for the better. As I sit here now, penning these words, I can't help but reflect on the events that brought Michael into my life. In the midst of chaos and confusion, he showed me the true meaning of courage and resilience, the strength to persevere in the face of adversity. And though our paths may never cross again, I will carry his story with me always, a reminder of the impact that one person can have on the lives of others. For in the end, it is not our circumstances that define us, but the choices we make and the connections we forge along the way. As I gaze out the window, the sun setting on another day, I can't help but feel a sense of hope stirring within me. For if Michael taught me anything, it's that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of light waiting to guide us home. As I stood at the front of my classroom, marker in hand, I felt a familiar sense of exhaustion wash over me. Teaching high school history wasn't easy, especially with a group of teenagers who seemed more interested in their phones than the lesson at hand. But despite the challenges, I loved my job. It was my passion, my calling. Midway through my lecture on the Civil War, my phone vibrated on the desk. Glancing at the screen, I saw an unknown number flashing. Curious, I excused myself to the students and stepped out into the hallway to answer it. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice low so as not to disturb the class. Listen carefully. A voice on the other end said, urgency dripping from every word. "You need to leave the classroom now. You're in danger." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was this? And why were they saying such things? Who is this? I demanded, my grip tightening on the phone. But before I could get an answer, the line went dead. Trembling, I glanced back at the closed door to my classroom. I couldn't just leave my students, could I? What if it was just a prank call? But the unease in the pit of my stomach told me otherwise. I returned to the classroom, trying to shake off the sense of foreboding that clung to me like a shadow. The students barely noticed my absence, their attention still glued to their phones or lost in their own world. I tried to focus on the lesson, but my mind kept drifting back to the mysterious phone call. Who could have been on the other end? And why would they say I was in danger? As the bell rang, signaling the end of the period, I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to mention the call to anyone. But ultimately, I decided it was probably just a prank and pushed the thought to the back of my mind. As the students filed out of the classroom, I lingered behind, gathering up my papers and textbooks. But as I glanced out the window, my heart skipped a beat. There, standing across the street, was a figure dressed in dark clothing, their face obscured by a hood. My breath caught in my throat as our eyes met, and for a brief moment, I could have sworn I saw a glint of malice in their gaze. I quickly averted my eyes, heart racing. What was going on? And why did I suddenly feel like I was being watched? That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me like a heavy blanket. The memory of the mysterious phone call and the sinister figure outside my classroom haunted my thoughts, leaving me tossing and turning in bed. Unable to sleep, I finally decided to do some investigating of my own. Pulling out my laptop, I began searching for any information that might shed light on what was happening. But no matter how many websites I scoured or how many phone numbers I dialed, I couldn't find anything that seemed relevant. It was as if whoever was behind this had covered their tracks completely. Frustrated and exhausted, I finally gave up and collapsed back onto my bed, feeling more helpless than ever. The next day at school, I tried to put the events of the previous day out of my mind and focus on teaching. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over me like a dark cloud. As the day wore on, I found myself glancing nervously out the window, half expecting to see the mysterious figure lurking outside once again. But the street remained empty, and the only sound was the distant hum of traffic. It wasn't until after school, as I was packing up my things to leave, that I saw them again. This time they were standing right outside the school gates, their hood pulled low over their face. Heart pounding, I hurried out of the building, hoping to confront them and finally get some answers. But as I approached, they turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing alone on the sidewalk, feeling more confused and frustrated than ever. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, the pieces of the puzzle suddenly began to click into place. The mysterious phone call, the sinister figure outside my classroom, it all started to make sense. I realized with a sinking feeling that I had been the target of a carefully orchestrated plot designed to frighten me into silence. But why? And who could be behind it? Suddenly, a name popped into my head, Jameson. He was a former student of mine, someone I had failed years ago for cheating on a test. Could he be seeking revenge? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I knew I had to investigate further if I wanted to get to the bottom of this. The next day, I went to the police with my suspicions, hoping they could help me track down Jameson and put an end to his sinister games once and for all. With their assistance, we were able to locate him, hiding out in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town. When the police confronted him, he confessed to everything: the phone calls, the stalking, the threats. As he was led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Finally, I could put this nightmare behind me and move on with my life. But as I looked back on the experience, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. Jameson had been a troubled kid, someone who had slipped through the cracks of the system. If only I had reached out to him sooner, maybe things could have been different. But for now, all I could do was be grateful that I had escaped unharmed, and hope that Jameson would find the help he so desperately needed. I stood at the front of the classroom, a whiteboard marker poised in my hand as I explained the intricacies of Shakespearean sonnets to my restless students. Their eyes flickered between their notebooks and the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes until the bell would release them from the confines of the classroom. Little did I know, this ordinary day would soon unravel into a nightmare. "Miss Thompson, can we go now?" "This stuff is boring," complained one of the students, interrupting my lecture. I sighed, pushing aside my frustration. "We still have 10 minutes left, Brian. Let's try to stay focused." Just then, a loud announcement crackled over the intercom, causing everyone in the room to jump. "Attention all students and staff. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we are implementing a lockdown procedure. Please remain in your classrooms until further notice. This is not a drill." Panic swept through the room like wildfire as students exchanged worried glances. I tried to maintain composure, though my heart raced with uncertainty. "Stay calm, everyone," I urged, my voice shaking slightly. "Let's follow protocol and wait for further instructions." Minutes turned into hours as we sat in silence, the tension in the air thickening with each passing moment. I attempted to reassure my students, though my own fears gnawed at me from within. What could possibly be happening outside these classroom walls? A knock on the door jolted us from our anxious thoughts. I cautiously approached and opened it to find a group of police officers standing in the hallway, their expressions grim. "Miss Thompson, may we come in?" one of the officers asked. I nodded, stepping aside to allow them entry. My pulse quickened as they explained the reason for the lockdown. A student had been found dead on school grounds. The news hit me like a sledgehammer, sending shockwaves through my already frazzled mind. Who could have committed such a heinous act within the confines of our supposedly safe school? As the police questioned students and staff alike, paranoia gripped the school like a vice. Rumors swirled, accusations flew, and trust shattered like fragile glass. Each glance felt accusatory, each whisper a potential indictment. I found myself subjected to relentless questioning, my every word scrutinized for any hint of guilt or complicity. The weight of suspicion bore down on me like a leaden cloak, suffocating me with its unjust burden. "I swear I don't know anything about what happened," I insisted, my voice hoarse with frustration. "I was in my classroom the whole time." But the doubt in their eyes remained, lingering like a stubborn stain that refused to be scrubbed away. Days turned into weeks as the investigation dragged on, each passing moment a torment of uncertainty and fear. The school became a prison, its once bustling halls now haunted by the specter of tragedy. Yet amidst the darkness, a glimmer of hope emerged. A breakthrough in the case led the police to uncover vital clues, inching closer to unraveling the mystery of the student's death. As the truth slowly came to light, the cloud of suspicion that had hung over me began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of relief tinged with sorrow for the loss that had torn our community apart. In the aftermath of the tragedy, our school emerged from the shadows, battered but resilient. We came together as a community, united in our grief, and determined to honor the memory of the student we had lost. Through acts of kindness and compassion, we began to heal the wounds that had torn us apart. We pledged to never forget the lessons we had learned, both painful and profound, and to strive for a future where such senseless violence had no place. Though scars remained, we emerged from the darkness stronger than before, our bonds forged in the crucible of adversity. And as we moved forward, we carried with us the solemn vow to never let our vigilance falter, lest tragedy darken our halls once more. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the polished wooden floor as I stepped into the foyer of St. Ignatius Catholic School. The scent of old books and incense hung in the air, mingling with the faint echoes of distant footsteps. I paused for a moment, taking in the grandeur of the building. High vaulted ceilings soared above me, adorned with ornate chandeliers that glimmered in the soft light. It was a far cry from the cozy kindergarten classrooms I was used to, but there was something undeniably captivating about the place. "Welcome to St. Ignatius, Miss Amelia," a voice called out from behind me. I turned to see a middle-aged woman approaching, her smile warm and welcoming. She introduced herself as Mrs. Thompson, the school's principal, and ushered me into her office. "It's a pleasure to have you join our team," she said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "I've heard wonderful things about your work with young children." I thanked her, feeling a flutter of nerves in my stomach. This was my first day at St. Ignatius, and the unfamiliar surroundings left me feeling slightly out of place. As Mrs. Thompson briefed me on my responsibilities and introduced me to the other staff members, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered at the back of my mind. There was something about the school that felt off, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. "Just give yourself some time to settle in, dear," Mrs. Thompson reassured me, noticing my apprehension. "I'm sure you'll feel right at home in no time." I nodded, forcing a smile as I glanced around the office. There was a framed photograph on Mrs. Thompson's desk, depicting a group of teachers and students gathered outside the school. Among them was a familiar face, my late Uncle Henry. "Is something wrong, Miss Amelia?" Mrs. Thompson asked, following my gaze. I hesitated, unsure if I should mention Henry's connection to the school, but something told me that his presence here was more than just a coincidence. I couldn't help but notice the photograph. I said, pointing to Henry's smiling face. "My uncle. He used to teach here too." Mrs. Thompson's expression softened, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Ah, yes. Henry was a beloved member of our faculty. His passing was a great loss to us all." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. Henry had always been fascinated by the supernatural, and his sudden death had been shrouded in mystery. I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to his connection to St. Ignatius than met the eye. But as Mrs. Thompson continued to speak, my thoughts were soon consumed by the tasks that lay ahead. As the newest member of the St. Ignatius family, I had a classroom to prepare and a new group of students to welcome into the fold. Little did I know, my journey at St. Ignatius was only just beginning, and the mysteries that awaited me would test not only my courage but also my sanity. After my first day at St. Ignatius, I found myself drawn to the stack of old boxes in the corner of my apartment. They contained the remnants of my Uncle Henry's life, his journals, his research notes, and the letter that had brought me to this eerie school in the first place. With a sense of trepidation, I pulled out the worn envelope and carefully unfolded the letter inside. Henry's handwriting was neat and precise, each word imbued with a sense of urgency. "Dear Amelia," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then I'm already gone. But there are things you need to know, things about St. Ignatius that I couldn't bring myself to tell you before." As I read on, my heart pounded in my chest. Henry spoke of strange occurrences at the school, of whispers in the shadows and voices calling out from the darkness. He urged me to uncover the truth, to delve into the mysteries that had haunted him until his dying day. But it was the final paragraph that sent a chill down my spine. "I fear that there are forces at work in St. Ignatius that are beyond our understanding," Henry wrote. "Be careful, Amelia. Trust no one, and remember that the truth may be more terrifying than you could ever imagine." I sat back, the letter clutched tightly in my trembling hands. Henry had always been fascinated by the supernatural, but I had never imagined that his obsession would lead him to such dark places. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved deeper into Henry's research, scouring his journals for any clue that might shed light on the mysteries of Street Ignatius. But the more I read, the more questions arose, and the more I began to doubt my own sanity. It was then that I heard a knock at the door, pulling me from my thoughts. With a sense of unease, I rose to answer it, half expecting to find some malevolent force lurking on the other side. To my relief, it was just my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, a kindly old woman who lived down the hall. "Amelia, dear, I thought I heard voices coming from your apartment," she said, peering at me with concern. "Is everything all right?" I forced a smile, trying to shake off the sense of dread that hung over me like a dark cloud. "I'm fine, Mrs. Jenkins," I replied, "just doing a bit of unpacking, that's all." But as she turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were following my every move. Closing the door behind her, I returned to Henry's letter, the words burning themselves into my mind. "Trust no one," he had said. But how could I uncover the truth of Street Ignatius without risking everything I held dear? With a heavy heart, realized that my journey into the darkness had only just begun, and that the secrets of Street Ignatius were far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. The days at Street Ignatius passed in a blur of activity and apprehension. Each morning, I would arrive at the school with a sense of trepidation, unsure of what new horrors awaited me within its walls. But it was the whispers in the hallways that haunted me the most, the faint murmurs that seemed to echo from the very depths of the building. As I made my way through the empty corridors one afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air felt heavy, charged with an electric energy that sent shivers down my spine. I quickened my pace, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere that seemed to envelop me at every turn. But no matter how fast I walked, the whispers followed, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. It was as if the very walls themselves were alive with the echoes of the past, urging me to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within the shadows. Lost in my thoughts, I nearly collided with Mrs. Thompson, who was hurrying down the hallway with a stack of papers in her arms. "Apologies, Miss Amelia," she said, her brow furrowed in concern. "I didn't see you there." Forced a smile, trying to shake off the sense of unease that gripped me like a vice. "No harm done, Mrs. Thompson," I replied, my voice sounding hollow in the empty corridor. But as she continued on her way, I couldn't help but notice the way her eyes darted nervously from side to side, as if she too could sense the malevolent presence that lurked within the shadows. As the day wore on, the whispers grew louder, their words becoming clearer with each passing moment. I strained to make out what they were saying, but their voices were distorted, their meaning lost in the cacophony of sound. It was then that I heard a soft sobbing coming from one of the nearby classrooms. Curious, I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, I found a young girl sitting alone at her desk, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I asked, kneeling down beside her. The girl looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes. "I saw something," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the din of the whispers outside. Something in the shadows." I felt a chill run down my spine as I listened to her words. Whatever was haunting Street Ignatius, it seemed that it was growing bolder by the day. But as I tried to comfort the young girl, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both in grave danger, and that the whispers in the hallways were just the beginning of the horrors that awaited us within the walls of this cursed school. The sun hung low in the sky as I watched the children play in the schoolyard, their laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. But despite the idyllic scene before me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As I kept a watchful eye on the children, I noticed a group of them gathered around the swings, their expressions filled with a mixture of fascination and fear. Curious, I made my way over to investigate. "What's going on here?" I asked, kneeling down beside them. One of the children, a young boy named Tommy, pointed a trembling finger at the swings. "They're moving by themselves," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I frowned, puzzled by the strange occurrence. The swings swayed back and forth, their chains creaking ominously in the stillness of the afternoon. "It must be the wind," I said, trying to reassure the children. But even as the words left my lips, I knew that something far more sinister was at work. As if on cue, the merry-go-round suddenly sprang to life, spinning wildly without anyone pushing it. The children gasped in horror, backing away as if afraid it might swallow them whole. I felt a surge of panic rising within me as I realized that whatever was haunting Street Ignatius had now turned its attention to the playground. Desperate to protect the children, I herded them back into the safety of the school, my heart pounding in my chest. But even as we sought refuge indoors, I couldn't shake the feeling that the malevolent force that lurked within the shadows was growing stronger by the minute. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave for the day, I couldn't help but glance back at the deserted playground outside. In the fading light of dusk, it seemed to take on an otherworldly aura, as if the very ground beneath it was cursed. As I hurried home, I couldn't shake the feeling that the events of the day were just the beginning of something far more sinister, and that the haunted playground was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to the horrors that awaited me at Street Ignatius. Determined to unravel the mysteries of Street Ignatius, I delved deeper into Henry's research, scouring through his old journals and poring over dusty archives in search of answers. Each day brought new revelations, each clue leading me further down the rabbit hole of the school's dark history. One afternoon, as I sifted through a stack of yellowed documents in the school's archive room, I stumbled upon a faded map dated back to the early 19th century. It showed the land upon which Street Ignatius now stood, but marked with something chilling, the outline of an ancient Native American graveyard. My heart skipped a beat as I realized the implications of this discovery. Could it be that Street Ignatius was built upon sacred ground, disturbed by the settlers who had come before? It seemed that the whispers in the hallways, the haunting on the playground, were all connected to the restless spirits of those who had been laid to rest beneath the school's foundations. Lost in thought, I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard a voice behind me. "Finding anything interesting, Miss Amelia?" Mrs. Thompson asked, peering over my shoulder. Quickly composed myself, hiding the map from view as I turned to face her. "Just doing a bit of research on the school's history," I replied, forcing a smile. "It's fascinating stuff." Mrs. Thompson nodded, though I could sense a hint of unease in her demeanor. "Be careful, dear," she said, her voice tinged with caution. "Some things are better left buried." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but I couldn't ignore the feeling of urgency that burned within me. There were secrets hidden within the walls of Street Ignatius, secrets that needed to be brought to light no matter the cost. As the days passed, I continued to unearth more clues, piecing together the puzzle of Street Ignatius' dark past. It seemed that there had been a string of disappearances among the female teachers over the years, each one more mysterious than the last. Rumors swirled about foul play and supernatural intervention, but the truth remained elusive. But it wasn't until I stumbled upon mention of a black raven mask that everything began to fall into place. According to legend, the mask was cursed by the spirits of the dead, its wearer consumed by darkness and driven to madness. As I gazed upon the crude sketches of the mask in Henry's journal, I realized with a sinking feeling that it was the key to unlocking the mysteries of Street Ignatius, and that confronting the malevolent force behind the hauntings would be the only way to bring an end to the horrors that plagued the school. The discovery of the black raven mask sent chills down my spine, its ominous presence casting a shadow over my thoughts. According to Henry's research, the mask was said to be cursed by the spirits of the dead, its wearer doomed to be consumed by darkness. As I pored over the ancient texts and faded manuscripts, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mask held the key to unlocking the mysteries of Street Ignatius. But with that knowledge came a sense of dread, a fear of what lurked in the shadows. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, the mask resting on the table before me like a macabre artifact, there was a knock at the door. With a sense of trepidation, I rose to answer it, my heart pounding in my chest. To my surprise, it was Father Michael, the school's priest, a concerned look etched upon his weathered face. "Miss Amelia, may I come in?" he asked, his voice grave. I nodded, stepping aside to let him enter. There was something in his demeanor that set me on edge, a sense of urgency that hung heavy in the air. "Is everything all right, Father?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated, as if unsure of how to proceed. "I've heard rumors about your investigations into the school's history," he said finally, his gaze never leaving mine. "I must warn you, Miss Amelia, some truths are better left buried." I felt a surge of anger rising within me at his words. How could he stand there and dismiss the suffering that had plagued St. Ignatius for so long? "With all due respect, Father, I cannot ignore the suffering that has plagued this school," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. "There are forces at work here that must be confronted, no matter the cost." Father Michael's expression softened, his eyes filled with sympathy. "I understand your desire to uncover the truth, Miss Amelia," he said, his voice gentle, "but be careful. The darkness that lurks within the shadows is far more powerful than you can imagine." With that, he turned and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the cursed raven mask that seemed to mock me from across the room. But despite Father Michael's warnings, I knew that I could not turn back now. The truth of St. Ignatius was within my grasp, and I would stop at nothing to uncover it, even if it meant facing the darkness head-on. The disappearance of Mrs. Johnson weighed heavily on my mind as I delved deeper into the dark history of St. Ignatius. According to Henry's research, she had been a beloved teacher at the school, known for her kindness and dedication to her students. But one day, she had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and speculation. Determined to uncover the truth, I sought out those who had known Mrs. Johnson, hoping to glean some insight into her mysterious disappearance. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the living room of Mrs. Johnson's former colleague, Mrs. Roberts, retired teacher who had worked at St. Ignatius for over 30 years. "Tell me about Mrs. Johnson," I asked, my voice quiet with anticipation. Mrs. Roberts sighed, her eyes clouded with sadness. "She was a wonderful teacher," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "Always willing to go the extra mile for her students. But after her husband passed away, she seemed different, distracted, almost. And then one day, she just vanished." I listened intently as Mrs. Roberts recounted the events leading up to Mrs. Johnson's disappearance, each word sending a chill down my spine. It seemed that there was more to this case than met the eye, and that Mrs. Johnson's fate was intertwined with the dark forces that plagued St. Ignatius. As I left Mrs. Roberts' house later that evening, my mind was racing with questions. What had happened to Mrs. Johnson? And was there a connection between her disappearance and the hauntings that had plagued the school for so long? Lost in thought, I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard a voice behind me. "Miss Amelia, wait." I turned to see Father Michael hurrying towards me, his expression grave. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with Mrs. Roberts," he said, his voice urgent. "Be careful, Miss Amelia. Some truths are better left buried." I felt a surge of frustration rising within me at his words. How could he stand there and dismiss Mrs. Johnson's disappearance as if it were nothing? "With all due respect, Father, I cannot ignore the suffering that has plagued this school," I said, my voice tinged with anger. "There are forces at work here that must be confronted, no matter the cost." Father Michael's expression softened, his eyes filled with understanding. "I know that you seek the truth, Miss Amelia," he said, his voice gentle. But be careful. The darkness that lurks within the shadows is far more powerful than you can imagine. With that, he turned and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the lingering mystery of Mrs. Johnson's disappearance. But despite Father Michael's warnings, I knew that I could not turn back now. The truth of St. Ignatius was within my grasp, and I would stop at nothing to uncover it, even if it meant facing the darkness head-on. The air was thick with tension as I stood before the looming facade of St. Ignatius, the black raven mask clutched tightly in my trembling hands. It was time to confront the malevolent force that lurked within the shadows, to bring an end to the hauntings that had plagued the school for so long. With a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The whispers that had haunted me for weeks seemed to grow louder with each passing moment, urging me forward into the heart of darkness. As I made my way through the labyrinthine corridors, I could feel the weight of centuries of suffering pressing down upon me. But despite the fear that gnawed at my insides, I refused to back down. I had come too far to turn back now. It wasn't long before I reached the heart of the school, a dimly lit chamber at the center of the building. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting and writhing like specters from another world. And there, standing before me, was the source of the darkness, a figure cloaked in shadow, its eyes gleaming with malevolence. "You dare to defy me, mortal," it hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. I squared my shoulders, steeling myself against the fear that threatened to consume me. "I am not afraid of you," I said, my voice steady despite the terror that pulsed through my veins. "You may have haunted this school for centuries, but your reign of terror ends here and now." With a flick of my wrist, I donned the black raven mask, its cold embrace sending a shiver down my spine. But as its power coursed through me, I felt a surge of strength unlike anything I had ever known. The malevolent force before me recoiled, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You cannot defeat me, mortal," it snarled, its voice filled with fury. But I refused to back down. With every ounce of determination I possessed, I unleashed the full force of the mask's power, banishing the darkness from St. Ignatius once and for all. As the last echoes of the malevolent force faded into nothingness, collapsed to my knees, the weight of my ordeal finally catching up to me. But as I looked around at the now silent chamber, I knew that my journey was far from over. For even though I had confronted the malevolent force behind the hauntings, the scars it had left upon St. Ignatius would linger for years to come. And as I made my way out of the school, the black raven mask clutched tightly in my hand, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors lay waiting to be uncovered in the shadows of this cursed place. With the malevolent force banished from St. Ignatius, I knew that my only chance of survival was to escape the haunted halls that had become my prison. Every step I took seemed to echo through the empty corridors, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on my shoulders. As I made my way towards the exit, a sense of unease settled over me. It was as if the very walls themselves were watching me, waiting to drag me back into the darkness from which I had just escaped. Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence, sending a chill down my spine. "Miss Amelia, wait." Turned to see Father Michael hurrying towards me, his expression filled with concern. "You cannot leave, Miss Amelia," he said, his voice urgent. "The darkness still lingers within these walls. It is not safe." I hesitated, torn between the desire to escape and the fear of what lay beyond the safety of St. Ignatius. "But I have to go," I said, my voice trembling. "I cannot stay here any longer." Father Michael's expression softened, his eyes filled with understanding. "I understand your desire to leave, Miss Amelia," he said, his voice gentle, "but be careful. The darkness that once haunted this school may still be lurking in the shadows." With that, he stepped aside, allowing me to pass. As I made my way out of the school, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving a part of myself behind, that the horrors of Street Ignatius would haunt me for the rest of my days. But as I emerged into the light of day, a sense of relief washed over me. I had escaped the clutches of the malevolent force that had threatened to consume me, and now it was time to bring the truth to light. With the black raven mask clutched tightly in my hand, I made my way towards the authorities, ready to tell them everything I had uncovered about the dark history of Street Ignatius. And though I knew that the school would forever be haunted by its past, I took solace in the knowledge that I had done everything in my power to bring an end to the horrors that had plagued it for so long. As I stood outside Street Ignatius, the weight of its dark history pressing down upon me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Though I had escaped the clutches of the malevolent force that had haunted the school, its lingering presence still hung in the air like a thick fog. With a heavy heart, I turned away from the imposing facade of the building, knowing that the horrors of Street Ignatius would continue to haunt me long after I had left its shadowy halls behind. As I made my way home, my mind raced with thoughts of everything I had uncovered during my time at the school. The disappearances, the whispers, the cursed raven mask, they were all pieces of a puzzle that had haunted me for weeks. And yet there were still so many questions left unanswered. Lost in thought, I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard a voice behind me. "Miss Amelia, wait." I turned to see Mrs. Thompson hurrying towards me, her expression filled with concern. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. I forced a smile, trying to push aside the memories of the horrors I had witnessed at Street Ignatius. "I'll be fine, Mrs. Thompson," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's just the school. It's like it's haunted by its past." Mrs. Thompson's expression softened, her eyes filled with sympathy. "I know, dear," she said, her voice gentle, "but sometimes the past is best left behind us. All we can do is move forward and try to make things right." Her words struck a chord within me, and I nodded, knowing that she was right. The horrors of Street Ignatius would always be a part of me, but I refused to let them define me. As I made my way home, the weight of the black raven mask still heavy in my hand, I knew that my journey was far from over. But with each step I took, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that I had faced the darkness head-on and emerged stronger for it. And though Street Ignatius would forever be haunted by its past, I took solace in the knowledge that I had done everything in my power to bring the truth to light, and that the darkness that once lurked within its walls would never again hold sway over those who walked its halls.